A cracked parking lot in an October wind. 5 wood-frame cabins leaning under bare maples, their doors hanging open like something walked out and never came back. The last one, at the end of the row, wears a faded blue door and a brass number gone sideways in 2 bent screws. A woman in a wool coat stands in the doorway of that cabin, still as a photograph, her lips moving without sound. She has been here before. Nobody knows that yet. A younger woman stands in front of her in the gravel 21, and cold and unslept, one hand raised. $6, she says. Somewhere behind her a man laughs. Somewhere behind him, a mile down the road, a silver rental SUV crosses a county line with a folded yellow letter on the passenger seat and a small silver key clipped to the corner. The auctioneer lifts the gavel. The wind holds its breath. The wind moved dead leaves across the cracked parking lot like it had somewhere to be. Sable Whitfield stood with one hand raised and the other pushed deep into her coat pocket. She was 21. She was cold. She had not slept. The auctioneer looked at her over the top of his folding table. He was a heavy man in a canvas jacket, and he had the kind of face that had watched 100 bad decisions and still felt obligated to confirm each one out loud. "Miss, did you say 6? She said she did. Behind him 5 cabins stood in a crooked row beneath bare maples. Their doors hung open. Their windows had been boarded so long the plywood had gone soft at the corners. Cabin 7 waited at the end of the line farthest from the road. Its blue door was faded to the color of an old bruise. The brass number 7 hung sideways from 2 bent screws. Sable had counted the screws that morning during the inspection. She had counted everything. It was what she did when she was afraid. A man in a camouflage jacket laughed near the back of the small crowd. He had bid 5 for the scrap metal on cabin 4. He had wanted 5 for the tin on 7 too, except he had already said the number out loud, and now he could not say it again without looking like he was chasing a girl. Odile stood a few feet behind Sable, with both hands hidden inside the sleeves of her wool coat. Her hair was pinned in the same tight roll she had worn since 1972. She was not looking at the auctioneer. She was looking at the blue door of cabin 7. Her mouth was moving without sound. Sable did not know that yet. $6 going once. Sable did not lower her hand. 6 going twice. The gavel came down. 9 days earlier, Sable had been standing in a different kind of driveway. The porch rail was rotting at the bottom post. Sable noticed it before she noticed anything else. That was another thing she did. She saw where things had started to fail before she saw the room. Marlon Whitfield came out of the open garage in pressed khakis and a golf shirt with Whitfield millwork embroidered across the chest. He was 47. He had the kind of gray at the temples that made strangers assume he had earned it. He was Odile's son. He was Sable's uncle. He was smiling. "Sable, sweetheart, you should have called ahead." She reminded him she had called Sunday. She reminded him she had called Monday. She reminded him Renata had answered once and passed the phone to a client. Marlon rubbed the bridge of his nose. It was a gesture he had inherited from his father, though Elias had used it when he was thinking, and Marlon used it when he wanted the room to understand he was being tested. Their station wagon idled in the driveway. It was packed so tight Sable could not see through the rear window. 2 blue suitcases stood on the concrete. Odil's small quilted duffel sat between them. Everything else the two of them still owned in the world was in a storage unit across town, or waiting in the little rented cottage they had to leave by Friday. Odile stayed near the passenger door. She had not spoken since the last stoplight. Sable knew that meant she was holding something inside her mouth like a piece of ice. Marlon looked past his niece to his mother and told her she should have let him come pick her up. They could have made a plan. They could have optimized this. Optimize this. Sable filed the word away. She was good at filing. She asked about the upstairs room, over the garage, if it was still there. Marlon looked at the closed side door of the garage as if he were checking. He wasn't. He was buying time. It was there, he told her. Technically, a supplier had dumped a whole quarter of inventory on them early. He had a millwork contract he couldn't miss. Sable did not tell him she had studied his company's public listings the night before at the motel while Odile slept. She did not tell him Whitfield Millwork had not filed a bulk supplier invoice in 8 months. She kept that in a drawer inside her head, right next to the porch rail, right next to the way Renata had said your father's yogurt is getting warm the last time she had spoken to Sable on the phone, as if she were reading a script off the fridge. The front door opened. Renata came out barefoot, holding a ceramic mug with both hands like it was hot. She was dressed from the ankles up for one of those video meetings Sable had never quite understood. Her eyes went to the luggage first, then to Odile, then quickly to Marlon. She said they had made good time. It was the kind of sentence people used when every honest sentence felt dangerous. Odile stepped forward for the first time. Her voice when it came was soft as pressed cotton. Well, sugar, the Lord takes his time, and he had some to spare this morning. Sable saw Marlon flinch. Odile had a way of quoting scripture the way other women quoted grocery lists. Flat, matter of fact, always aimed. Marlon had grown up under that voice. It still worked. He tried again. There was a place off the highway. Clean rooms, little kitchenettes. He could cover a few nights while they sorted this. A few nights. Until they figured out what makes sense. What makes sense. Sable filed that too. She told him what made sense was the room he had promised her mother when he built out that garage. When Grandpa Elias had signed the second on his own house so Marlon could put in the shop. When Odile had written him that check in '98, Marlon closed his eyes for the length of a breath. He asked her not to do the ledger thing. Not right now, the ledger thing. She almost laughed. She had learned the ledger thing at the kitchen table of a woman who had cleaned motel cabins at 18. She had learned it because Odile had said numbers were the one language a man could not talk out of the room. She had learned it because when your mother disappears at 4 and your father was already a roomer, the woman who raised you teaches you which words carry weight. She did not laugh. She only told him the number had been 18,000. Renata took a small step back on the porch, just enough for Sable to notice. Marlon's voice went smooth again. His salesman voice. He had a solution. A senior community out near Millville. Beautiful place. Ground floor apartments. Different levels of care, so if mom needed more support later. Different levels. That was Odile. Odile had not moved. Odile was still watching Marlon like a weather system she had already survived once. Like a parking garage, she told him quietly. Marlon's mouth tightened. She was only asking, she said. He had used the phrase different levels. She had heard it. She was checking with her granddaughter whether that had been the phrase. Sable confirmed that it had. Just checking, Odile murmured and turned her face slowly toward the porch rail and said nothing else. Sable felt something small go still inside her chest, the way a switch clicks off in a room you did not know had been humming. Marlon put his hand on the back of his neck. He looked for 1 second like the boy in the photograph Odile kept on the hallway table, the one where he was 10 and holding a plastic fishing rod at a lake nobody remembered the name of. Then he lifted his phone. He was booking 3 nights at the Highway Inn, 2 queens, free breakfast. He would text the confirmation. Sable told him he already had. He had confirmed quite a lot. She picked up the smaller suitcase. Odile reached for the duffel, but her fingers did not close properly around the handle. Sable saw the tremor. She saw Marlon see it. Marlon took 1 step forward. Odile got the duffel on the second try. She lifted it into the back seat with the deliberate slowness of a woman who had learned that pride costs less than pity. He would load them up, Marlon offered. Sable watched Odile settle herself against the seat. They were loaded, her grandmother told him without looking. Renata finally came down off the porch. She stopped 3 steps short of Sable, close enough for the coffee smell, but not close enough to be part of what was happening. This wasn't how they had wanted today to go, Renata whispered. Sable asked how she had wanted it to go. Renata's eyes filled, which annoyed Sable more than anger would have. Tears asked to be comforted. Sable had no comfort left in her pockets. Renata began to explain that if Marlon had just presented some options, he had presented breakfast, Sable told her, and closed the passenger door for Odile. She did not slam it. She closed it the way she closed a ledger at the end of a bad month, softly, with finality. Marlon called after them across the driveway. She was acting like he was putting them on the street. Sable stopped with her hand on the driver's door. No, she said. He was putting Odile at a motel. There was a difference. He had been very clear about the difference. She got in. Odile did not look at the house as they pulled away. She looked straight ahead, down the street they had come in on, at the long line of Bradford pears, just starting to give up their leaves. And after a full block, she said very quietly that Sable's grandfather had warned Marlon about that porch rail 4 summers ago. Sable knew. He had known too, Odile added. Sable knew that also. Odile nodded once and closed her eyes. Whatever she had been holding in her mouth like ice, she swallowed. The Riverbend Inn had a red roof, a brown carpet, and a lobby that smelled like waffle batter no matter the hour. Their room overlooked the dumpster enclosure. Marlon had booked 2 queens. Sable stood at the curtain and watched a delivery truck idle by the freeway on-ramp. The taillights turned the room a shade of red she did not have a name for. Odile sat on the edge of the far bed with her coat still on. She had not taken off her shoes. She was rubbing her right thumb against the inside of her wrist in a small, slow circle, and she did not know she was doing it. Sable had started noticing that circle in July. She had not asked. If they stopped speaking, Odile said finally, they could each have their own bed. Sable was not mad at her. Odile hadn't said she was. She had said if. That was hypothetical. Sable came away from the window and sat down on the other bed. The mattress felt like it had been used as a diving board by a small conference of accountants. Odile removed her shoes with the careful ceremony of a woman who had learned that if she pretended each moment was ordinary, sometimes it agreed to be. She had known he was going to say no. Sable murmured. Odile did not answer for a long moment. Through the wall came the muffled thump of an adult guest exercising or trying to kill a piece of furniture. She had known he was going to say something. She hadn't known it would sound so much like carpet samples. Optimized, Sable offered. Bandwidth was a new one, Odile admitted. Sable said he had learned it at a conference. Then he had been overcharged. Sable's mouth almost moved into a smile. She caught it and put it back. She reached into her purse and took out the yellow legal pad. She wrote their savings at the top, 9,400 minus what she had set aside for Odile's neurologist appointment in December. She did not write down what she had set aside for the neurologist. She kept that number in a separate place, under a separate lock, the way you kept a house key on a chain that never left your neck. Below the total, she began a column: motel, storage, food, gas, prescriptions, deposit if they found a place. She watched the number at the top get smaller before she had spent a cent. Odile lay back against the pillows with her ankles crossed. Her ankles were swollen. Sable had noticed that in the driveway too and had said nothing, because pointing at a body was a way of admitting it was failing. And Odile had never let anyone say that word out loud in her presence. Whatever Sable was writing down, Odile told her she shouldn't hide it. Odile had been reading her handwriting since she was 7. Sable turned the pad around and slid it across the bedspread. Odile read it. She read it twice. That was a lean winter, she said. That was a January in a house with no fireplace. Sable agreed. Ma'am. Odile handed the pad back and closed her eyes. There was a paper on the desk she remembered. The woman at the front desk had been pushing it at her while Sable was parking. Local Weekly. She had said people still found rentals in it. Odile had told her people still lined drawers with it too. Sable got up. She found the paper on the small laminate desk beside a plastic coffee maker that looked like it had opinions. She sat back down on her own bed and turned pages. Used appliances, rooms for rent, church suppers, pickup trucks, whose owners use the word classic to mean rusted. She almost turned past a box notice near the back. Then she went back a page. She read it once. Then she read it out loud. County surplus auction. Blue Lantern Motor Court. 5 wood frame cabins, structures only. Buyer responsible for removal within 10 calendar days. Inspection Wednesday. Sale Saturday, 9 a.m. The room went very still. Odile did not open her eyes. She asked her to read it again. Sable read it again. Odile opened her eyes. Blue Lantern, she repeated softly. She said the two words the way another woman might say the name of a river she had been baptized in as a child. Sable asked if she knew it. Odile did not answer. She looked at the ceiling instead. A single water stain in the shape of Florida spread above the television. She knew of it, she said finally. That was a different thing. Sable waited. Waiting was another thing she was good at. It was off the old highway, Odile murmured at last, before they put the bypass in and killed everything that used to breathe out there. Grandpa and she had driven past it once when Sable was small. He had slowed down. He had not said why. Sable asked if she wanted to see it. Odile looked at her for a long time. She wanted to eat some yogurt from that little box in Sable's bag, she said, and she wanted to close her eyes and think about a color. And in the morning, sugar, if Sable still wanted to drive out there, they would drive out there. That was as close as she came to saying yes. Sable set the alarm for 5:30. She lay awake until 2. Ilse Marchetti met them at the boarded office at 10 past 10. She was 68 years old, broad across the shoulders, silver haircut bluntly at the jaw. She wore a denim jacket, work boots, and the kind of small silver crucifix that had come from a mother-in-law and stayed on because taking it off would have started a longer conversation than keeping it on. She held a ring of keys in one hand and a travel mug in the other. She watched Odile ease out of the station wagon, and then she looked at Sable. She asked if they were there for the inspection. Sable confirmed they were. That was what people said before they did something expensive, Ilse told her. Sable said she had been warned. Ilse's face moved in a way that was not quite a smile. Sable filed that too. Then Ilse looked past Sable to Odile, and her eyes changed. Just for a second. She looked at Odile the way you look at a face you have seen in a photograph a long time before you meet the person. Her mouth opened. Her mouth closed. She turned toward the cabins. Odile mentioned that the light was pretty for October. She said it too fast. Sable heard. Ilse led them down the Crescent Drive past Cabin 1 and its tree limb through the roof past Cabin 2 that leaned like it had opinions about gravity, past Cabin 3 whose smell announced itself politely from the porch. Cabin 4 had been stripped of copper down to the doorknobs. Cabin 5 was the only one Ilse had already agreed to demolish herself. Cabin 7 waited at the end of the row, narrow and small, and painted a faded green that had once tried to be cheerful. Its porch was 3 feet deep. Its single window had been covered with plywood so long ago that a wasp had built a nest inside the seam and abandoned it. Ilse fitted the key. The lock resisted for a second, then gave. The smell came first. Dust-damp wood mouse droppings. And under all of that, the ghost of a bar of soap that had been thrown out in some other decade. Sable stepped inside. Odile did not follow her at first. Odile stood just inside the doorway with one hand on the frame, and her face did something Sable had never seen on it before. She stood there like a woman walking into a house she had left the stove on in. Sable murmured her grandmother's name. Odile told her she was coming. She just needed a minute. Sable moved through the room. She was measuring. She could not help it. She stepped heel to toe across the boards and counted. 12 feet on the long wall, 9 on the short, a door in the back into a bathroom the size of a hall closet, an iron bed frame without a mattress, a nightstand missing one drawer, a brown vinyl chair split down the middle, its foam gone the color of tobacco. Sun came through the plywood gaps in thin gold bars. Odile finally stepped in. She stepped in with the careful weight of a woman who did not want to make the floor make a sound. She walked to the center of the room. She stopped. She turned in a slow half circle. She looked at the corner near the bathroom door. She looked at the window with its plywood. She looked at the space above the doorframe where a shelf must have been once. There was still an outline in the paint, a rectangle faintly darker, 3 feet long. Ilse leaned against the doorway with her mug. This one had housed traveling men, she said back when a traveling man could cross 3 counties and still make it home with his dignity. Sable asked what had happened to the place. The bypass had killed the traffic. Her husband had kept the cabins open on monthlies for a while after that, but cheap rent drew expensive trouble. Then he had died, and she had kept meaning to do something with it. Instead, she had gotten a phone call from the county about surplus auction, which was what happened when a woman put off a decision long enough. Odile touched the paint outline above the doorway with 2 fingers. Ilse saw her do it. Ilse did not say anything. Sable pressed her foot down against the boards near the wall. The floor did not give. She pressed again in 3 different places. She checked the base of the wall where the plaster had fallen away. She saw a stud that had been sawed in the wrong direction and then patched. She asked how old the roof was. 11 years, Ilse told her. She asked about the joists, original, not rotten as far as Ilse knew. Her husband had kept a book on this place. She still had it. She asked about the foundation. Concrete piers, 6 of them. 2 were cracked. She asked if it could be moved. Ilse looked at her. Miss Whitfield. She began, then paused, asked her first name again, and started over. That was not the question she wanted the answer to, yet Ilse told her. The question she wanted the answer to was what it would cost, because if she couldn't afford, the second the first didn't matter. Sable asked what it would cost. That depended on the woman with the trailer. Sable asked who that was. Maya Santos, Ridgeway Towing. She had moved 2 sheds for Ilse's cousin, and neither one had fallen apart until years later. Ilse would write down her number. Ilse pulled a stub of pencil from her jacket pocket and wrote a number on the margin of the auction flyer. Odile had not moved from the center of the cabin. Odile was looking at the outline above the door. Sable called to her softly, "Ma'am." She did not usually call her grandmother ma'am. She did when she was scared. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Odile lowered her hand from the paint. She was fine, honey. She had gone somewhere. Sable pressed. She had, Odile admitted, where Sable did not ask outright. She only waited. "Later, sugar," Odile murmured. "Later." Ilse straightened away from the doorway. The auction was Saturday morning, 9 sharp. If they were serious, she told them they should talk to Maya before they bid. The $6 house usually cost considerably more than $6. Sable repeated the number. 6, figure of speech. Sable filed that too. She looked back at Odile, who had turned once more toward the shelf outline over the doorway, and Sable saw very clearly, for a full second, that her grandmother's lips were moving without sound. She was counting. She was counting something. Or she was praying. Or she was saying a name. Sable did not ask. Not yet. She stepped back out into the light, and she wrote in her notebook in her small, precise hand the words, "7 feels like she has been here before." Maya Santos pulled onto the cracked asphalt in a mud-spattered tow truck with a yellow light bar and a dent in the passenger door that had been there since 2019. She climbed down holding a tape measure. She was in her early 50s, broad-shouldered black hair, streaked silver, and pulled through the back of a faded cap that said Ridgeway in white letters gone the color of oatmeal. She looked at Sable. She confirmed she was the Whitfield. She confirmed she was 20. Sable corrected her. 21. That was 20, Maya said. She rounded for insurance. Maya walked around cabin 7 twice before going inside. She measured the width. She crouched by each corner. She used a long screwdriver to test the sill plate. She did not talk. Odile sat on the porch step of the ruined office in a folding chair Ilse had produced from somewhere, with the calm authority of a woman who had produced folding chairs at many worse events. Maya went under the cabin on a mechanic's creeper. She came out with clay across the front of her jacket. It would move, she declared. Sable asked how much. 2,800 if the route behaved, Maya told her. The route would not behave. Add 300 for tree limbs to be cut at the exit. Add another 2 for temporary bracing. Add whatever the site prep was at wherever Sable was taking it, which Sable hadn't told her, because they didn't have a site, Sable admitted. Then they didn't have a move. They had a fantasy that cost $6 up front. Sable did not blink. She wrote the numbers down. 28, 3, 2. She wrote a small dash beside them the way she always did, so she would know later she had listened. Maya watched her write. She asked if Sable was planning to live in it. Odile answered from the folding chair. She did not raise her voice. They were planning, she said, to see what a woman could do with a small house and some spare afternoons. Maya looked at Odile. Then she looked back at Sable. She saw the tremor in Odile's left hand, which Odile had not yet learned to hide from a stranger's eyeline. She saw the packed station wagon on the other side of the lot. She saw the way Sable held the pencil. She told Sable to find land before she bid. A cheap building could bankrupt her as fast as an expensive one. It only felt friendlier at the start. She handed Sable a printed estimate on a clipboard. At the bottom in blue ink, she had written, "No guarantee against pre-existing structural failure." Sable initialed the line. Maya raised one eyebrow. That was fast. Sable told her she read faster than she signed. Maya's mouth moved a quarter inch. That was as close as she came to smiling. She climbed back into her truck. Before she pulled away, she leaned out the window and pointed at Odile with her chin. That woman knew something about that cabin she wasn't telling. Sable said she knew. That was a start, Maya allowed, and drove off. The rest of the day went the way days went when a woman was pretending to think and had already decided. They drove back to the Riverbend Inn. Sable filled the yellow legal pad. On one page, she wrote the numbers Maya had given her. On another page, she wrote the numbers she still had. On a third page, smaller, tighter. In a corner, she wrote a number she had not written down anywhere else in 5 months. 2,400. Community college, spring semester. Deposit already paid, refundable through Monday. Sable had checked twice. She had not told Odile she had checked. She had not told Odile she had checked twice. Odile fell asleep in the recliner with the television on mute. A man on the screen was demonstrating a mattress. Odile's mouth was open slightly, and her right hand was still doing that small, slow circle against the inside of her left wrist, even in sleep. Sable put a blanket over her. She turned off the mattress man. Her phone rang at 11:48. The screen said, Renata. Sable stepped into the bathroom and closed the door. She greeted her aunt. Renata greeted her back. Sable identified the location from the pump beep in the background. Renata gave a small laugh that was the kind a person made when laughing was the only thing keeping them from a different sound. Sable, Renata, began. She wanted to tell her something, and she wanted Sable to promise not to call her back on this number when she used it. Sable promised. The room, upstairs, over the garage. Sable waited. It wasn't full of inventory. Sable did not answer. She sat down on the closed lid of the toilet. She looked at her own bare feet on the cold tile. Renata's voice came thin through the phone. It was a short-term rental, she confessed. Marlon had been listing it for weekends. Cash came into an account he had opened at a credit union she hadn't signed for. He told her the money was from side installs. She had checked the credit union statements last month. 90% of the deposits were from the platform. The listing site. Yes. Sable's mouth went dry. Since March. About $2,200 a month, most months. Sable closed her eyes. She asked why. Renata was quiet for a while, because she said finally if Odile had moved into that room, she would have seen the mail. She would have seen the deposit statements from the credit union that came in on real paper. She would have seen the messages on his laptop when he left it on the counter. She had raised him Sable. He knew he could talk to Renata. He knew he could not talk to his mother. Sable felt something small and sharp go through her chest and settle at the bottom of her stomach. She had opened the door anyway, she told her aunt. She had opened it Thursday. She had opened it in March. Except Renata hadn't. And she should have. Renata's breath caught with each one. Sable said she wasn't asking Renata to fix anything. She was asking her to know what she had done. The pump beeped again in the background. Somewhere in the parking lot on the other end of the phone, a car door slammed. There was a small notice, Renata said quietly. In the county paper this week. Sable had seen it. Marlon had seen it too. On Tuesday. He had said out loud in the kitchen that if Sable was dumb enough to bid on one of those, it would solve his mother problem for him. Sable did not answer. Renata apologized. Sable did not answer that either. She hung up. She sat on the bathroom tile for a full minute with the phone in her lap. Then she opened her banking app. 2,400. Community college. Spring semester. refundable through Monday. She tapped refund. She confirmed the refund. She turned off the phone. Then she came out of the bathroom, sat down on the edge of the bed, and watched her grandmother sleep with her mouth slightly open and her right hand still drawing that small, slow circle against her wrist. She said out loud to no one they were not going to a parking garage. Saturday came in, cold and blue. Sable dressed in the dark. She put her hair up. She braided a smaller braid inside the larger braid, which was something Odile had taught her when she was 7 and had told her was for when you wanted to think without your hair helping. Odile woke slow. She dressed even slower. She did not ask what Sable was wearing to a cabin auction. She did not ask why Sable was carrying the small brown envelope from her purse in her coat pocket instead of in her purse. They stopped for coffee at a station where the man behind the counter recognized Odile and did not ask how she was. He looked at her and nodded once. He greeted her as Miss Odile. He said it in the way Southern men said the names of women they had known since they were boys. Sable had never been in that station before. She filed that too. At the Blue Lantern, 23 people had gathered in the cracked lot. Most had come for tool scrap lumber or the county's 2 retired maintenance trucks. The man in the camouflage jacket was there calculating tin values out loud. A woman in a green Carhartt jacket had come for the cast iron radiators inside cabin 2. Cabin 7 came last. The auctioneer started at 500. Nobody moved. He dropped to 100. Nobody moved. 50. Nothing. 25. Nothing. The man in the camouflage jacket said, 5 for the tin, and folded his arms. Sable had her hand in her coat pocket the whole time, around the edge of the small brown envelope. 24 $100 bills. Old habit. Odile did not trust checks written out in front of strangers. Sable had gotten the bills from the bank on Friday afternoon. She had rubber-banded them in stacks of 5. The auctioneer scanned the crowd. He had 5. Did he hear 6? Sable raised her hand. $6. 21 years old. Cold coat. Braid inside a braid. The auctioneer stared at her over the top of his folding table. He asked if she had said 6. She had. The man in camouflage laughed. Odile turned her head just enough to look at him. Sable did not see what her grandmother's face did, but the man stopped laughing. 6 going once. Sable did not move. 6 going twice. The gavel came down. Odile made a sound so small, Sable almost missed it. It was not a gasp. It was the sound of a woman who had been holding her breath for a very long time and did not fully trust the air she was being asked to breathe next. Sable signed the receipt on the hood of the county clerk's car. She wrote a check for $6 because a check would go through the county payment system the same day, and she wanted the record. She wanted the record. She wanted the record to say in ordinary black ink that a woman named Sable Whitfield had bought a building on a Saturday morning at the age of 21 for $6 American. She walked back to Odile. Sugar Odile murmured. What had she done? Bought a cabin. With what? Sable did not answer. Odile looked at her. Odile knew. Sable, she said again softer. Sable told her she had refunded the deposit. for the spring semester. Odile closed her eyes for 1 second. When she opened them again, they were wet. But her voice was dry. Baby. That had been her seat at the table. There would be another table, Grandma. Sable. There would be another table. Odile put her hand on Sable's cheek. Her hand was cold, and it trembled, and Sable did not flinch. She told Sable she was her grandfather's child. She said it twice. Absolute child. Sable did not know, standing there in the parking lot, exactly what her grandmother meant by that. She would know in 20 minutes. Ilse Marchetti was already walking toward them. She had a folder under one arm. She had a look on her face Sable had not seen on it before. She asked them to come inside a minute, to bring her grandmother. The boarded office had one small, unboarded window and a space heater on the floor, pumping out a dry orange warmth. Ilse unlocked a battered file cabinet. She pulled out a tin box the size of a shoebox. It had once been a Christmas cookie tin. The lid still showed a painted sleigh. She set it on the desk. She took off the lid. Inside were papers, deeds, a folded receipt for a septic tank, a photograph of a wedding party from the 70s, a newspaper clipping, and at the very top, a single black and white photograph, 4x6, curled slightly at the corners. She lifted it out. She turned it toward Odile. Odile did not take it. Odile sat down in the metal chair by the door as if her knees had been quietly informed and had made a decision without asking the rest of her. The photograph showed two young women in white kerchiefs standing in front of a cabin. The cabin had a blue door. The door had a brass number on it. A 7 hung slightly crooked from two brass screws. The girl on the left was maybe 17. She held a broom. The girl on the right was 18. She held a tin bucket. She had Odile's mouth. She had Odile's chin. She had unmistakably the same small, tight-rolled bun Odile still wore in 2026. Her husband Ilse said very softly had kept this in his sock drawer for 38 years. Odile did not speak. He had passed 2 years ago, Ilse continued. She had moved his socks. She had found the tin. There had been 3 photographs of the cabins from the summer of '68. This was the only one with people in it. She had asked around. Nobody in town could tell her who the girl on the right was. She had put it back in the tin. She had put the tin in the cabinet. She had told herself that was that. Sable was standing very still. She murmured her grandmother's name. That morning, when Ilse had seen Odile walk toward cabin 7, she had known that face. Odile finally spoke. Her voice was not the voice she used with Marlon. It was not the voice she used at the drugstore. It was a voice Sable had never heard. His name had been Rocco. Ilse's mouth opened. He hadn't been cruel. Odile continued, still looking at the photograph in Ilse's hand. He hadn't been kind either. He had paid on time. He had given the girls a Christmas ham. He had had a wife who was already sick. Odile had been 18. She had cleaned cabins here for a summer and a fall. She had saved $51. She had gotten on a bus in November. She had never come back down this road. Not once. Not until yesterday, when a little notice in a little paper had made her granddaughter drive them here. So she had come home, Ilse said quietly. Odile turned her head slowly to look at Sable. Sugar, she said. Come here. Sable came. Odile took the photograph from Ilse's hand. She held it in her own two hands. Her hands were trembling more than usual, and she did not try to hide it. This was where she had met her grandfather. Sable did not breathe. He had been 23. He had been foreman on the road crew putting in what became the bypass, the one that killed this motel. He had not known it was going to kill anything yet. He had rented cabin 7 for 6 weeks. He had left her quarters on the windowsill. He had left her a peach once wrapped in a handkerchief. He had left her a note that said good morning to a girl who has better handwriting than the men I work with. 3 months later, she had married him in a church that wasn't there anymore. Sable felt her eyes fill. Odile did not look away from the photograph. Sable, she said. Baby. She hadn't bought her a cabin. Sable could not speak. She had bought her the doorway. Ilse turned away. She wiped her cheek quickly with the back of one hand. She said something in Italian very softly under her breath. And then she said in English that she had a lease. Odile looked up. The half-acre on the west side, Ilse continued. Along the highway. Old overflow parking. Nobody wanted it. She would lease it to the two of them for $100 a month for 5 years, with first opportunity to discuss purchase before she listed it to anyone else. She wanted it in writing. She wanted 2 months up front. She wanted them to carry insurance on whatever they put on it. But she wanted to be very clear that she was not giving them a gift. She was selling her share of a story she had had no part in. And she was undercharging. Sable asked why. Ilse looked at her for a long time. Ilse looked at the photograph in Odile's hands. Ilse looked once, out the small unboarded window, at the blue door of cabin 7/2, a football field away, catching the mid-morning sun. Because her husband Ilse told her, had kept that photograph in his sock drawer for 38 years, Miss Whitfield. And she would like to know, before she died, why. Odile handed the photograph back to Ilse with both hands, to keep it in the tin. It belonged in the tin, but to make her a copy for the granddaughter. Ilse said she would. Sable stepped outside into the cold blue morning. The parking lot was emptying. The county clerk's car was pulling away. The man in the camouflage jacket was loading tin sheets into a pickup and swearing at the tailgate. Cabin 7 stood at the end of the row. Its blue door was hers. She walked toward it slowly, one hand in her pocket, around the small brown envelope with what was left of $2,400 in it, and she said out loud to a cabin that could not hear her yet that they were going to see what a woman could do. She stood there a long time, long enough that the sun moved, long enough that a starling landed on the porch rail and looked at her like she was interrupting something. Long enough for Odile to come out of the office at Ilse's slow, careful pace and cross the lot to meet her. Odile stopped beside her granddaughter without speaking. They looked at cabin 7 together. Finally, Odile spoke. Sable, honey. Ma'am. Sable had never asked her why Grandpa had slowed the truck down that one time when they had driven past this place. No, ma'am, Sable admitted. She hadn't. She should have. She was asking now. Odile smiled very faintly, very tired, and she put her arm through Sable's, and she told her he had slowed down because he had wanted to show her something. He had been going to. He hadn't. He had said it was not the right day. He had said they would come back. He had not gotten to. And she had let that be a story she had not told Sable because she had thought stories like that belonged in a drawer. Did she understand what she was telling her? Sable understood. She had just taken it out of the drawer, Odile said. They stood there another minute. Then Odile spoke again softer. There was someone she needed to tell her about. Not today, but soon. Sable asked who. Odile did not turn to look back. She was still watching the blue door. Her mother, she said. Sable turned to look at her. Sable's mother was going to hear about this cabin, Odile continued. She was going to hear about it very soon. And when she did, she was going to come. Sable asked how she knew. Because Odile told her there was money attached to it now. And that woman only showed up when there was money attached. Sable did not answer. She did not need to. A mile down the road, on a road, nobody was watching, yet a silver rental SUV had just crossed the county line, with a woman inside it who had not spoken to her daughter in 17 years, but who had 3 days earlier filed a report with a state agency about an elderly woman living in unsafe conditions with a granddaughter who was too young to be trusted. The engine hummed. The county line sign fell behind. She had the address written on the passenger seat, and in her purse folded in half, she carried a piece of yellow paper from a family attorney in Alabama with the words, "Rental Income Statement," stamped across the top, and a small silver key clipped to the corner. Sable, 21 years old, standing in a cracked parking lot in a coat too thin for October, did not know the woman was coming yet, but her grandmother did. The lease was 3 pages typed in large print on cream paper, and Ilsa had left a space at the bottom of the second page where a woman with a shaking hand could sign without needing to explain the shaking. Odile signed it on a Monday morning at 9:10, at the folding table inside the boarded office with the space heater going, and a paper cup of coffee cooling at her elbow. Her signature came out uneven at the O. The rest of it followed like a small procession of children holding on to each other's coats. Ilsa pretended not to look. Sable pretended not to look. Odile pretended not to see them pretending. It was a very southern silence. Then Odile handed the pen to Sable, and Sable signed her name underneath in the small tight hand she had used since she was 7, and Ilsa folded the lease into thirds and put it in a manila folder and told them to go find a woman with a trailer before she changed her mind about being reasonable. Maya Santos arrived Wednesday morning with Jen and a hydraulic trailer painted the same yellow as her light bar. She walked the route twice. She measured the 2 tree limbs that had to come down at the exit. She looked at the gravel entrance to the western half-acre and made a small sound in the back of her throat that was neither approval nor complaint. It was the sound of a woman calculating something and deciding not to tell you yet. The site was soft, she told Sable. Sable already knew. Clay under the topsoil. Her grandfather had told her once about land near the highway. Then Sable should order more gravel than she thought she needed. Sable had 8 tons on Monday. Maya raised one eyebrow. Not much. Just enough that Sable caught it. Missed Whitfield. She said if Sable kept doing that, Maya would stop billing her extra for the fear tax. Move day came in gray. Not raining yet. Just the kind of gray that was thinking about it. A church bell rang somewhere south of the highway at 7. Sable heard it through the plywood window of cabin 7, while she and Odile packed the last of the small things into a milk crate. Ilse had brought over 2 flashlights and a thermos. Warren Pike had stopped his rig on the shoulder of the highway, on his way to a delivery, and had climbed down without being asked. He had not asked whether he was needed. He had just come. I was 66 years old. He was tall. He wore a red flannel shirt over a white undershirt, and he had the kind of face that had watched a lot of bad weather from the driver's seat of a truck. He held out a coffee to Sable for steadiness. Sable took it. She asked how he had known. Warren looked at her. He looked at Odile inside the cabin, wrapping the vinyl chair in a moving blanket. He looked at Maya, walking the trailer around into position. He looked at the sky. Little town, he told her. Big news. He did not say more than that. He rolled his right shoulder once slowly and did not mention it. Maya wedged the steel beams under the cabin one at a time. Jen worked opposite her. They braced the walls with lumber. Sable's grandfather's tool chest could not have improved. When the cabin lifted off its old piers by the first inch, the whole small building made a soft sound, like a woman turning over in her sleep. Odile stood on the porch of the boarded office with one hand on the railing Warren had rebuilt once, and she watched. She did not speak. She was counting again. Sable saw the lips move. She did not ask. They pulled forward. 1/2 mile. That was all. 1/2 mile from the crescent lot down to the gravel entrance at the western half-acre. The trailer rolled at a walking pace. Ilse walked alongside it. Jen walked opposite. Sable walked behind. And for the first 200 yards, it went the way things go when a woman has already made her peace with the ground. Then the left rear tire hit the fresh gravel at the entrance. Then the fresh gravel gave. Then the tire kept going. Down. 6 inches. 9. A foot. The trailer tilted. Sable heard the sound before she understood what she was hearing. It was not a crack. It was a groan. A slow groan out of the front corner of the cabin, like a piece of furniture being asked to hold a weight it agreed to only theoretically. And then it was a crack, sharp. A single dry snap from the corner post above the blue door. Everyone stopped. Maya spoke one word. Sable's grandmother had raised her not to say in public. Sable was moving before her mind had finished deciding to move. She climbed onto the trailer bed. Rain had started. Not hard yet. A thin sideways rain that felt colder than it should have. She put her hand flat against the blue door. Maya shouted at her. Maya shouted her name. Sable did not step back. She asked where Maya wanted her. Maya climbed up beside her. Maya looked at the split. Maya looked at Sable's 21-year-old hands on the 21-year-old door. Maya's face changed. She wanted her to hold it, right there, palm on the plane of the door. Not push, not pull, Just hold it in the plane it was in, so the frame didn't shift while Maya braced. Sable held it. Rain ran off her hair and down the sleeve of her coat. Jen ran for the drill. Warren, without being asked, had already positioned himself beneath the front corner with a length of 4x4 across his shoulder. He was 66 years old, and he held that beam up under a leaning cabin the way a man holds up something he had made a private promise to. He did not grunt. He did not speak. He held. And later, when Sable would remember this moment for the rest of her life, she would remember also the small, careful way. He rolled his shoulder once when it was over, and did not complain and did not stop coming back. Maya drove 3 long screws through a temporary sistering brace. She drove them fast. She drove them at an angle Sable's grandfather would have argued with for 20 minutes and then agreed to. When the last screw seated, she called for everyone off the trailer. Sable stepped down. Warren stepped out from under the beam. He was breathing hard. He did not say so. The blue door had not fallen. The split was there. A pale diagonal line across the corner post above the frame. But the plane had held. Sable looked at her own hand. There was a small brown streak of old paint on the palm like a birthmark that had been waiting for her. Odile was standing on the porch of the boarded office. She had not moved. She had one hand pressed flat against her chest, and Ilsa was standing next to her without touching her, because Ilsa knew that touching Odile in that moment would break something Odile was trying to hold up on her own. Maya was quiet for a while, then observed that had been fast Miss Whitfield. It had been her grandfather, Sable said. Maya asked what she meant. He had told her once, Sable explained. If a door started to move on you, you put your hand flat on the plane and you held. You didn't push. You didn't pull. You just held. Maya looked at her a long time. Then softly she called Sable's grandfather a good man. Sable agreed. Yes, ma'am. Warren looked away. He wiped rain off his face with the back of his wrist. Nobody heard that phrasing much anymore, he said to no one in particular. Plane of the door. Ilse across the lot was crying without moving her face. They got the trailer moving again by 3 o'clock. Rico came out from the Ridgeway yard with more gravel and a length of timber cribbing. The wheel climbed. The cabin settled. Maya set it down on 4 fresh concrete piers, exactly where Sable had marked with a stake and a length of orange twine 2 days before. The blue door had to be lifted by the knob to close. Sable did not care. She stood in the middle of the small room with her hair wet and her coat streaked with mud, and she looked up at the ceiling, where a thin sliver of gray sky was still showing through a seam near the front corner. Above her, the metal roof had come loose along a 2-foot line. Rain was already dripping onto the floor in a slow tap, tap, tap that would eventually mean something. Odile stepped inside. Odile stepped inside a house that had been on wheels an hour ago and was now on land. Odile's father might have once sold a strip of when he was dying, if Sable had asked the right question at the courthouse yet, which she had not. Odile turned in a slow circle. Well, she said. It was not much. It was theirs, Sable told her. Odile murmured that was the same sentence Sugar said 2 different ways. They tarped the corner that night. Warren stayed. Ilse brought over the last of a chicken stew she had made on Sunday and had been eating out of a saucepan alone. Maya sent Jen home and stayed herself, and she and Sable and Warren worked in the light of 2 battery lanterns, while Odile sat in the vinyl chair with the moving blanket over her knees and did not ask to help. The rain stopped a little after 10. The stars did not come out, but the wind died. Sable slept that first night on the same air mattress from the motel with Odile on the other half. Their shoulders almost touched. The heater was one small ceramic tower Ilse had produced from the manager's apartment behind the office. The tower was set on low. It clicked on and off in a rhythm Sable would come to know as intimately as her own breathing. Odile did not sleep for a long time. Sable knew because Sable did not sleep either. At some point past midnight, Odile spoke into the dark. She wanted Sable to know something. She would have said no to this cabin if Sable had asked. Sable knew. That was why she had not asked. Sable knew that too. Odile was quiet for a while. Then softer, she said she was glad Sable had not asked. The tremor in Odile's left hand did not stop after that night. It got worse. It got worse the way a slow leak in a pipe gets worse. Not all at once. Never all at once. Just a little more each morning so that by the time you knew for sure, you had already been living with it for a while. Sable saw it when Odile poured coffee. She saw it when Odile threaded a needle at the sewing machine on the folding card table. She saw it when Odile brushed her own hair in the mirror over the small folding shelf Sable had installed above what was going to be eventually a sink. Odile hid it. Odile hid it the way Southern women hide a limp. Under a longer sleeve, behind a cup held with 2 hands instead of 1. Inside a joke about arthritis and the weather. Sable did not ask. Not yet. Because asking, Sable understood, was going to open a door she was not ready to walk through. And she was already carrying one door, which was the blue one, which lived in the plane of its own frame only because she had held it there in the rain. She could not carry 2 yet. Alterations started in a way that surprised no one and everyone. Maya mentioned Sable's grandmother's sewing machine to a dispatcher. The dispatcher mentioned it to a waitress. The waitress mentioned it to a woman who worked at the county extension office. By the end of the first week, 3 pairs of pants sat on the folding card table, waiting to be hemmed, and Odile was sitting at the machine with her reading glasses low on her nose, and her left hand was resting flat and steady on the fabric, while her right hand fed the needle because she had learned early, long before the tremor, that the trick was to move only what needed to move. Sable watched her from across the room. She wrote in her yellow legal pad, "Income, $2 a hem, $12 a jacket sleeve, $15 for a zipper, $20 for a lining, small numbers, real ones." She wrote costs, thread, needles, electricity when it finally came in. Propane for the little camp stove she was still cooking on outside under the porch overhang. She did not write the number she was thinking about, which was Odile's neurologist. December 14th, 3 months away. She kept that in a separate place, under a separate lock. Sable found the medicine on a Tuesday. She was washing Odile's soft blue cardigan in the plastic tub Ilse had loaned them. She turned out the pocket the way you always turned out a pocket before you washed a thing. Because Odile had once put a stick of butter in a pocket. Because Odile had once put a $2 bill in a pocket. Because Odile had once put a fishing lure in a pocket, and Sable had learned the hard way. The pocket was empty. The inside pocket. The little zippered one Odile had sewn in herself 2 years ago. That one was not empty. Sable unzipped it. She pulled out an amber bottle. The label said, Odile Whitfield, Carbidopa Levodopa, 25 milligrams, 1 tablet 3 times a day, dispensed 8 months earlier. Sable sat down on the floor of cabin 7 with the bottle in her palm. She sat down all the way. She did not decide to sit. Her legs decided. 8 months. 8 months, which meant February, which meant Odile had known in February, which meant Odile had known through Easter, through Mother's Day, through the whole summer of Sable, coming home on weekends from community college with her books in a plastic bag because she did not have a proper backpack yet, which meant Odile had known when she'd stood at the stove in the cottage in July frying okra and had turned to Sable and had said, "Sugar, promise me you will finish. Whatever else happens, promise me you will finish." And Sable had promised, and Odile had known. Sable put the bottle back in the pocket. She zipped it. She washed the cardigan. She hung it on the line Ilsa had strung behind the boarded office. She did not confront her grandmother. Because there was a way you confronted a woman like Odile, and there was a way you did not. And Sable had learned which at a kitchen table when she was 7 years old and had come home from school and had asked why her mother was not there. Odile had told her Sugar, "Some questions get better answers if you wait until you're grown to ask them." Sable had waited. She would wait now. But she took the bottle out again that night after Odile fell asleep, and she wrote the name of the medication down in the back of her yellow legal pad, and she looked up what it meant on her phone under the covers of the air mattress, with her hand cupped over the screen so the light would not wake her grandmother. She read for a long time. She turned off the phone. She lay on her back in the dark, and she did not cry, because Odile had raised her not to cry over the shape of a thing. Odile had raised her to cry over the losing of a thing if she cried at all. And Sable was not going to lose this thing yet. She was just going to have to hold the door. The stepladder incident happened on a Saturday. Sable had driven into town to deliver a bag of alterations to the diner and to pick up a 14-inch drill bit Warren had said would help set the second row of hurricane clips along the ridge. She was gone 42 minutes. She knew because she checked her phone twice on the drive back. She turned in at the gravel entrance and she saw first the ladder. It was leaning against the front porch of cabin 7. It was leaning the wrong way. It was leaning with 2 feet on the porch and 2 feet on the gravel, and the gravel had shifted and the ladder had shifted with it. Odile was on the ground beside it. She was sitting up. She was holding her right shoulder with her left hand. Her cardigan was torn along the sleeve. There was blood on her elbow, but not much. Her face was gray in the way faces went gray when a woman had decided in the 4 seconds between falling and being seen that she was not going to be caught crying. Ilsa was already there. Ilsa had come running from the office. Ilsa had a dish towel pressed against Odile's elbow. Sable dropped the bag on the porch. Alterations spilled. She did not stop. She called her grandmother's name. Odile was all right, honey. She was not. She was. Sable started to argue again. Odile lifted her eyes. Her eyes were dry. Sable Louise Whitfield, she said, do not raise your voice at me on my own porch. Sable stopped. Odile had fallen, she told her. She had not broken. She had not died. She had not embarrassed her. She had fallen. And the next thing that was going to happen was Ilsa and she were going to stand up, together, slowly. And Sable was not going to put her hands under her arms like she was a sack of potatoes. Because if she did that, Odile would never forgive her. Did she understand? Sable understood her. Sable did not touch her. Ilse helped Odile to her feet with the slow, careful choreography of 2 women who had already been 68 and 76 between them for a while. Odile stood. Odile winced. Odile did not say she winced. Urgent care, Ilsa told her. Not necessary. Odile Whitfield, get in the truck. Odile got in the truck. The urgent care took them at 3:40. The nurse who checked Odile in did not know her. That was a small mercy. The doctor was a woman about Renata's age with kind eyes and a firm mouth. She looked at Odile's shoulder. She sent Odile for an X-ray. She came back with the film pulled up on a tablet and told them the shoulder was not broken. The shoulder had been strained badly. Odile had partial tearing of what she called the supraspinatus, which Sable wrote down in her yellow legal pad in the parking lot afterward, because she had left the pad in the glove box and had already decided she was going to look up every word. The doctor also asked with the tablet lowered and her voice more careful how long Odile had had the tremor. Long enough. The doctor did not press. She asked whether Odile was following up with a neurologist. December 14th. Sable, sitting in the corner chair, did not move, because Odile had never spoken those 2 words out loud in Sable's presence. And Odile had just spoken them out loud, which meant Odile had known Sable understood, sitting in that chair, that Sable already knew. Which meant Odile had let Sable find the bottle. Which meant the bottle had been a message. Sable's throat closed for a second. Then she opened her yellow legal pad and she wrote in her small, tight hand at the top of a new page the word we. Not the word I, not the word she. The word we. The doctor turned to Sable. Her grandmother needed a sling for 4 weeks. She needed to not lift anything heavier than a cup of coffee with her right arm. She needed to not climb any more ladders, not step ladders, not any ladders. And she needed to keep her neurology appointment. Yes, ma'am. Odile murmured she had heard the doctor the first time, honey. The doctor smiled without smiling. She had been talking to Odile's granddaughter, she said. Odile knew that too. At home, and it was Sable, realized home. Now she had started calling it home, in her own head without meaning to. Odile lowered herself into the vinyl chair beside the small ceramic heater and closed her eyes. Sable knelt on the floor and untied Odile's shoes. Odile let her. The brochure, Odile said, was in the top drawer of the little dresser she had brought from the cottage. In the sock drawer. Behind the socks? The senior community brochure. Yes. Marlon had given it to her at the driveway. Yes. She had kept it. Odile had. Sable did not answer. She stood up. She walked to the small dresser. She opened the top drawer. She reached behind the socks and she pulled out a glossy trifold brochure with a photograph of an older woman on the front, smiling at a floral arrangement that was, Sable realized, on inspection plastic. She looked at Odile. The second panel, Odile murmured. Sable opened it. The second panel talked about levels of care. Sable, Odile said. She wanted her to hear her. She had not kept that brochure because she was going to go. She had kept it because she wanted to remember what he had offered her. So the next time he offered her anything, she remembered the shape of his offering. Did she understand? Sable did. Now she wanted Sable to tear it up in front of her. She wanted to see it in pieces on the floor of her own cabin sugar. Because she had not bought this cabin. Sable had bought this cabin, which meant the tearing was Sable's job. Sable tore it. She tore it slowly. She tore it deliberately. She tore it into strips first and then across, and she let the pieces fall onto the plywood floor between them. Odile watched. "That's my girl," she said very softly. Then, softer still, she asked Sable to sit down beside her. There was something she had been keeping in her mouth like a piece of ice for 8 months. She would like to put it in the room. Sable sat. The doctor's word for it was Parkinson's, Odile told her. Early stage, slow onset. She had known since February. She had not told her because she had not wanted her to defer the spring semester. She had not told her because she had not wanted her to say the word "we" at her. Because she knew how Sable said the word "we." She said it like a woman putting on a coat. And that coat sugar had been too heavy for a girl her age. Sable's eyes filled. She did not let them spill. Sable was going to say something now, Odile said, and she was going to sit still and listen, because she had not let her say anything about this for 8 months, so she might speak. Sable had already deferred. Odile went very still. Not community college, Sable clarified. Community college had been easy. She had refunded the deposit. She had told her. That was the $6, Grandma. That had been that. She meant the 4-year, the bridge program, the one they had let her into for spring. She had called them from the parking lot on Monday. She had said she needed a year. They had said all right. They had said reapply next October. She had already deferred. She had done it before she had found the bottle. She had done it the day she had heard Marlon say the phrase, "mother problem." Odile closed her eyes. Sable, she breathed. Sable was not putting on a coat, Grandma. She was choosing her weather. Odile put her good hand over her face. Her good hand was still shaking, but less than it had been. From behind her hand, she said that had been her grandfather's phrase. Sable knew. The electricity came on the following Friday. The panel had to be replaced. It cost $260 they did not have. Sable wrote the check anyway. When the licensed electrician flipped the main breaker, the single ceiling fixture. Ilse had helped them wire up, produced one thin yellow bulb of light. It lit the stripped walls. It lit the exposed bracing. It lit the small, clean square of clean floor where the sewing machine sat. It lit the space heater. It lit Odile in the vinyl chair with her arm in the sling. Sable stood in the middle of the room and looked up at the bulb. That, she said quietly, was the ugliest light she had ever loved. "Amen," Odile murmured back. Warren came by that evening. He brought a small propane heater in a canvas duffel. He said it had been his wife's. He said his wife had used it in the sleeper of the truck the winter of the ice storm. He said the shutoff was reliable, but the label was worse than the machine. He said not to trust the label, ever. Sable took the heater with both hands. She asked how much. Warren shook his head. No. She said his name. He said he had not paid her for the lamp yet. She reminded him he had given her 20 for the lamp on Tuesday. He shook his head again. That had been for the plug, not the socket, not the cord, not the checking. He owed more. She looked at him. He looked at her. She would accept this heater, Sable told him, if he would accept that she knew what he was doing. Southern women, Warren said, half to himself, half to the porch. All of them. Every single one. He nodded once, put on his hat, and walked back to his truck. From the chair, Odile murmured that man's wife had made him casseroles for 41 years, and he could not let a woman refuse a heater. Sable should remember that. Sable remembered. Alterations became a business the way a stream becomes a river. Not all at once. Not with a sign in the yard that said grand opening. Just 1 week 3 pieces on the folding card table. The next week 7. The week after 13. Maya sent jackets from her yard. The waitress from the diner brought a bag of aprons that needed patch pockets. A school teacher from the county extension office brought her mother's wedding dress in a plastic garment bag and said the hem had come out during her mother's funeral. Odile had held the dress across her lap for a long time before she had said anything at all. Then she had told the teacher softly that she would make this hem better than the first one, because the first one had been made in a hurry. The teacher had cried. Odile had not. Warren brought a beat-up plastic newspaper box he had gotten out of a diner dumpster in Chattanooga. Sable and Warren mounted it beside the gravel entrance and painted "Take One, Leave One" across the front in white letters. Warren stocked it with paperbacks from his own truck cab, mysteries, westerns, a war history, a romance whose cover featured a man whose shirt had lost a battle with a wind machine. The romance disappeared first. 2 westerns arrived in its place. There was no accounting for taste. Warren observed. But there was accounting for horses. Sable smiled. She smiled more now than she had smiled in the driveway. She did not know that yet. Odile knew. The medicine came up again on a Tuesday when Odile could not open the child-proof cap with one hand. Odile sat at the folding table with the amber bottle in front of her. She looked at it for a long minute. She looked up at Sable. She did not ask. Sable came over. She took the bottle. She opened it. She shook out 1 tablet onto her palm. She handed the tablet to her grandmother. She poured a small glass of water from the jug on the counter. She handed the glass to her grandmother. 3 times a day, Sable told her. Morning, lunchtime, 6. She had set alarms on her phone. Odil's was not always with her. This was not a coat, Grandma. This was a schedule. Odile did not answer at first. She took the tablet, she drank the water, she set the glass down, she reached across the folding table and took Sable's hand. Odile's hand was still trembling. Sable's hand was very still. Sugar, Odile said. She was going to teach her how to change a light fixture. She was going to teach her how to bleed a radiator. She was going to teach her how to read a title report. Because she was not going to be able to do those things for her forever. And she would like to give them to her the way her grandfather had given them to her. Sable listened. Also, Odile continued, she was going to teach her how to make pie crust. Because there were some things a woman could not afford to buy from a stranger. Sable laughed. She laughed for the first time in 22 days. She laughed the way people laughed when the laugh had been waiting behind their teeth for a while. Odile smiled. There it was, she said. The month turned. Late October became early November. The maples along the highway went red, then rust, then bare. The wind picked up. Sable started sleeping with 2 blankets. Odile stopped complaining about the sling, which Sable took as evidence Odile had made peace with it, which was in Odile's grammar the same thing as accepting help. Warren dropped by twice a week. Ilsa walked over with a thermos most afternoons at 4. Maya sent Jen by with 2 rolls of foil insulation and a note that read, Storm season. Use these. Do not argue. M. Sable stapled the foil insulation to the inside of the roofline herself on a Saturday alone, while Odile sat in the vinyl chair and called out where to put each staple. She did not fall. She had learned. The rental SUV came on a Wednesday afternoon. Sable was sitting at the folding table, hemming a pair of gray wool trousers when she heard the tires on the gravel. Wrong tires. Rental tires. Cheap ones. Too fast for the gravel. She looked up. She saw the silver SUV pull in. She saw the driver's door open. She saw the woman step down. The woman was 43. She was thin. She wore a camel-colored coat that had been made in a city Sable had never visited. Her hair was the color of expensive whiskey blown out that morning at what Sable would later realize was a hotel in Nashville. She wore small pearl earrings. She wore lipstick the color of a wound. She did not shut the driver's door. She turned toward cabin 7. She saw Sable through the new glass window Warren had installed the week before. She smiled. The smile did not reach her eyes. Behind her, another car pulled in. A dark blue sedan. State plates. A woman in a navy blazer got out of the driver's seat and stood beside her open door with a clipboard, not smiling. Sable put down the needle. Sable stood up. Odile in the vinyl chair, with her sling and her sock feet, said quietly, without looking, that was her. Sable asked who. She knew who Sugar Odile told her. She had always known who. Sable walked to the blue door. She opened it. She stepped out onto the small porch. The woman in the camel coat lifted one gloved hand. She waved. She waved the way a woman waves at a daughter she has not seen in 17 years and has decided to pretend she saw last Christmas. Sable, sweetheart, she called. She had been looking for her everywhere. Mama was home. Sable did not answer. The woman in the navy blazer took one step forward. Her badge caught the afternoon light. It said, Adult Protective Services. She introduced herself as Ms. Brennan. She was with the state. She had received a report of concern regarding an elderly resident at this address. Might she come in? Sable, 21 years old, standing in the doorway of a cabin she had bought for $6 on a half-acre she was leasing for $100 a month, with her grandmother behind her in a sling, and a woman she had not seen since she was 4 standing in her gravel driveway. Calling herself Mama Sable, told Ms. Brennan she was welcome to come in. The other woman was not. The woman in the camel coat lowered her hand slowly. The smile on her mouth did not move, but something in her eyes did. The APS agent stepped forward with her clipboard. The camel coat did not step forward, not yet. She opened her purse instead. She pulled out a folded piece of yellow paper. She held it up so Sable could see the letterhead, which said in dark green ink, "The law offices of Pennington and Galt, Montgomery, Alabama." "Sable, honey," she said. They were going to need to talk, because she had been named on some things Sable didn't know about, and Mama didn't know she knew. Behind Sable, in the vinyl chair, Odile spoke one word. She spoke it quietly. Delphine, the woman in the camel coat, looked past her daughter for the first time and met her mother's eyes across the small doorway of a small cabin on a small half-acre off a highway. Nobody drove anymore. "Hello, Mama." Odile told her she was standing on her grandfather's land. She knew. Then she knew what happened next. The APS agent looked between them, uncertain for the first time since she had arrived. The clipboard lowered a quarter inch. Sable stepped aside to let Ms. Brennan pass. Sable did not step aside for the other woman. The blue door stayed open behind her. The wind came in off the highway and lifted one loose corner of the foil insulation on the ceiling, and it made a soft rippling sound like a page being turned in a book that had been closed for a very long time. And somewhere in the sock drawer of the small dresser, Odile had brought from the cottage under 2 pairs of thick winter socks, folded in half and pressed flat with the palm of an old woman's hand, was a photocopy of a black and white photograph from 1968 of 2 girls in white kerchiefs standing in front of a cabin with a blue door and a brass number 7 hung slightly crooked from 2 brass screws. Ms. Brennan clicked her pen. "Miss Whitfield," she said. "Let's begin." Sable agreed. "Yes, ma'am, let's." Ms. Brennan sat at the folding table in the chair Sable had cleared for her. She placed the clipboard on the tabletop. She placed a pen beside the clipboard. She placed both hands flat on the wood on either side of the clipboard, the way a person places their hands before they say something they have rehearsed on the drive over. Sable stood by the sink. There was still no sink. There was a plywood counter with a dish tub on top of it and a 5-gallon water jug on the floor beneath. Sable had been meaning to call about the drain permit for 6 days. She had not. Which she suddenly understood was going to be a line in Ms. Brennan's report if she did not stop noticing it. Odile stayed in the vinyl chair with the sling. She did not stand up when the state woman came in. She said, "Good afternoon," in a voice that was polite and dry, and if you had never met Odile before, easy to mistake for weak. Ms. Brennan was not easy to fool. She looked at Odile a long time. Then she looked at Sable. She needed to be clear about what she was there to do. Sable understood. She had received a report of concern about Mrs. Odile Whitfield, 76 years old, currently residing at this address with a diagnosis of early-stage Parkinson's, who had been reported to be living in a structure without approved plumbing, adequate insulation, or an appropriate primary caregiver. The report had been filed by Delphine Whitfield Pennington on Monday of this week. Sable did not blink at the last name. She filed it. She kept her face flat. Pennington, Odile echoed. Ms. Brennan glanced at her. "That was the name on the report, ma'am." Quietly, Odile murmured, "That was her third." The APS agent's pen paused for 1 second above the clipboard. Then it kept moving. She would like to say this once, plainly, she told Sable. She was not there to remove her grandmother. She was not there to condemn this building. She was there to observe conditions, ask questions, and file a report. Whether that report recommended further intervention would depend on what she saw, what her grandmother told her, and what documentation Sable could provide about the arrangements they had made. Sable asked what kind of documentation. The kind Ms. Brennan told her that showed she was not making it up as she went along, which was the kind of sentence Odile would normally have taken as a challenge and made a woman regret. Odile did not take it. Odile said, without turning her head, that the green folder was on top of the sewing machine. Sable was to bring it. Sable went to the sewing machine. There was a green folder on top of it. There had been a green folder on top of it for 6 days. Sable had assumed her grandmother had bought it for a pattern. Sable had been wrong. She brought it to the table. Ms. Brennan opened it. Inside was every piece of paper Sable had produced in the last 5 weeks in order, in Odile's handwriting, labeled at the top of each in blue ink. Lease half-acre, western parcel, receipt of sale cabin 7, structural move, estimate, Ridgeway, towing, electrical panel installation license work order, water hydrant installation license work order, medication log week 1, medication log week 2, medication log week 3, medication log week 4, neurology appointment confirmation December. Letter of intent to install legal holding tank. Contact list for emergency caregivers. Miss Brennan looked up at Odile. Odile did not look at her. Odile was watching the ceiling where the foil insulation still made its faint rippling sound in the draft. Her granddaughter didn't know she had made this folder, she said, still not looking at anyone. She had made it in the manager's apartment while she was doing laundry. Ilse had known. She had asked her not to say. Sable started to speak softly. "Grandma." Sugar Odile murmured back without turning. "Do not interrupt the state." Ms. Brennan went through the folder for 11 minutes. She wrote things down. She asked Sable to walk her through the physical layout of the cabin. She asked Odile about her medication schedule. She asked to see the outdoor hydrant. She asked about the sleeping arrangement, and Sable showed her the air mattress, and the space heater, and the extra blanket. She asked about food. Sable showed her the propane stove under the porch, overhang the cooler, with ice replaced every second day. The cutting board Warren had built from a scrap of Ilsa's motel siding. She asked about hygiene. Sable took her across the Crescent lot to the manager's apartment behind the boarded office, where Ilsa had a bathroom with 2 temperatures cold and personal injury. Odile called them, and a working washer. Ms. Brennan wrote everything down. She did not smile. She did not frown either. She had the kind of professional face that was going to make its decision in a windowless office at 11 o'clock that night, and not before. When they came back to Cabin 7, Ilsa walked with them. Ilsa had put on a clean flannel and had Sable notice dabbed a small amount of lipstick on her mouth, which was Ilsa's version of dressing up for the state. Ms. Brennan stood in the middle of the small room with her clipboard. She would need to speak with 2 witnesses about ongoing care. Marchetti, Ilsa began. She owned the parcel this cabin sat on. She leased the western half-acre to these 2 under a 5-year written agreement. She checked on this woman every day. She had never once seen her go without a meal a dose or a warm room. Ms. Brennan wrote that down. The blue door pushed open behind them. Warren Pike stepped in with his hat in his hand. He did not smile at the state woman. He nodded once. "Pike," he said. Truck driver, retired mostly. He had met these people the day the trailer sank. He had been through here 2 or 3 times a week since. He had never seen anything but a woman being cared for by a girl who read faster than she signed. Ms. Brennan wrote that down too. Maya Santos came in 10 seconds later. Sable did not know how she had known. Maya later said Jen had called her from the diner. Maya wiped her boots on the little braided rug at the door, the rug Odile had made in 3 afternoons from strips of the ruined moving blankets, because Odile did not throw away anything that could be a rug. Santos Maya introduced herself. Ridgeway Towing, structural mover. She had put this cabin on its piers. She knew exactly what it could and could not do. The frame was sound. The corner post was sistered. The roof was tarped and pending replacement in April. Miss Whitfield here had paid every invoice she had handed her within 7 days, which put her ahead of most contractors in this county. Ms. Brennan looked at all 3 of them. She looked at Sable. How old was she, Miss Whitfield? 21. How long had she been the primary caregiver for her grandmother? Since she was 14. On paper, since she was 18. In practice, since Grandpa had passed when she was 10. Ms. Brennan did not write that down. She closed her clipboard. The report from Sable's mother alleged that a competency evaluation of Mrs. Whitfield would be appropriate at this time, given the diagnosis and current housing conditions in support of a guardianship petition. Sable did not react. Odile did. In the same dry, polite voice she had used at the beginning, she asked whether she might speak plainly. Ms. Brennan told her she might. Odile was 76 years old, she said. She had a diagnosis. She took her medication. She sewed for money. She kept a folder. She signed her own name. She would fail in time. That was the deal every one of them made with their own body. But she would not fail on Delphine's schedule, and she would not fail into her hands. Because the last time that woman had taken hold of a thing that had belonged to her, She had left it at a bus station in Mobile with a note pinned to its jacket. That thing had been 4 years old. That thing was standing in front of Ms. Brennan now. Did she have children? Ms. Brennan did not answer. She did not have to answer, Odile added quietly. She had only asked so that she would understand the register she was speaking in, which was the register of a mother. Ms. Brennan looked at Odile a long moment. Then Ms. Brennan opened her clipboard again. She wrote 3 lines. She closed it. She would file her report tomorrow, she told them. Her preliminary observation was that this residence, while non-standard, was stable, that Mrs. Whitfield was oriented and self-directed, that medication compliance was documented, and that community support in the form of Ms. Marchetti, Mr. Pike, and Miss Santos was verifiable. She would note her professional recommendation against any guardianship petition on the basis of alleged competency. The state would not initiate one. Sable felt her knees loosen half an inch. She would require a follow-up in 90 days, Ms. Brennan continued. She would need documentation of the neurology visit. She would need documentation of the planned holding tank installation. And she would need Sable to file a caregiver affidavit, so there was a legal name attached to what she was already doing. Sable agreed. Ms. Brennan turned to Odile. If Odile ever needed to speak to a state representative without her granddaughter present, she could call this number and ask for her by name. She would come. She would come whether or not Odile's daughter had called first. Odile thanked her. Ms. Brennan thanked her back for the coffee. There had not been coffee. Odile did not correct her. Ms. Brennan stepped out. She walked past the woman in the camel coat in the gravel driveway without stopping. She got into her navy sedan. She backed up. She turned around. She drove out onto the highway. Delphine Whitfield Pennington stood in the gravel with her hand on the open door of the silver rental SUV. She looked up at the porch of Cabin 7. She looked at her mother in the vinyl chair through the open blue door. She looked at her daughter standing on the porch step in a coat 1 size too thin for the wind. Sable honey, she called. Could she come in and speak to her privately? No, ma'am. The word ma'am was not respectful, not the way Sable used it, not that afternoon. It was a placement. It was offense. Delphine's mouth did the small tight thing it had done earlier. She had paperwork, she said. Sable needed to see it. About her grandmother's assets. Sable had paperwork, too, about her mother's assets. Come back Monday, she told her. 2 o'clock. She would read hers if her mother read hers. Delphine looked at her for a long moment. Then she got in the SUV and drove away. The gravel dust hung in the air for a full minute after she was gone. Ilsa came up the porch step and put a hand on Sable's shoulder. Miss Sable, she said. She had something to show her. The tin box, Sable guessed. Better than the tin box, Ilse told her. The deed book. All of them. Down at the courthouse. Because her grandfather had known something, and Rocco had known something, and Ilse had been holding on to something her husband had never told her. And this afternoon, she thought they might all learn a thing at the same time. Sable went to the courthouse the next morning at 9. She did not tell Odile she was going. She wore Odile's good coat because her own was still muddy at the hem. She wore Odile's Sunday earrings because Odile had put them into her palm at breakfast without saying why. She drove Warren's truck because her station wagon had a headlight out, and the county did not need another reason to notice her. The deed office was on the second floor of a brick building that had been a bank in 1911. The clerk was a woman named Miss Bola Poindexter. She was 70 years old. She wore 2 pairs of glasses on 2 different chains. She had known Odile as a small girl back when a woman of 18 still stopped to tie the shoe of a child of 12 on the church steps. Though she had not seen her since the summer Odile had disappeared on a bus in 1968. When Sable said her grandmother's name at the counter, Miss Bola looked up over the top of the second pair of glasses. Whitfield, yes, ma'am. Odile, yes, ma'am. Miss Bola told her to come around the counter. Sable came around. Miss Bola pulled a heavy blue ledger off the low shelf. She turned it to the year 1970. She ran her finger down the columns. She stopped at a row. There, she said. Sable read the row. The row said, Parcel 684, Whitfield SIT to Marchetti RJ 4 acres, east, southeast portion of Section 12. Recorded April 4, 1970. Consideration $850. Sable repeated the number. $850. In 1970, Miss Bola confirmed. Sable asked what it had been worth. About $3,200 at the low end, Miss Bola told her. Highway frontage had already been going up. The Marchetti man had known. Sable asked about the initials. ST. Samuel Tobias Whitfield, her great-grandfather. He had died August of that year. Pancreatic cancer. He had been 59 years old. He had sold that strip in April because a woman named Doris Whitfield had needed a specialist in Birmingham. Doris had been her great-grandmother, Odile's mother. She had lived 17 more months after that specialist, which had been at the time considered a small miracle. Sable stood in the deed office of a small county courthouse in a coat that had been her grandmother's since 1998, and she understood very slowly and very completely that the half-acre she was leasing for $100 a month from Ilsa Marchetti was not overflow parking. It was the west edge of her great-grandfather's land. Miss Bola asked if she wanted a certified copy, honey. Yes, ma'am. Please. Miss Bola made the copy. Sliding it across the counter, she added one more thing. Sable should tell her grandmother that Bola Poindexter had said hello, and that Bola Poindexter had been holding on to the school photograph Odile had left in the back of her Sunday school Bible since June of 1968. If she wanted it, she could come get it. She had been welcome to come get it for a very long time. Sable did not know what to do with her face. She promised she would tell her. She drove back to the cabin with the certified copy on the seat beside her. She parked. She got out. She walked up the porch step. She opened the blue door. Odile was sitting in the vinyl chair with her sling and her tea. Ilsa was sitting in the folding chair across from her with a mug of her own. They had been talking. They stopped talking when Sable came in. Sable put the certified copy on the folding table. She did not sit down. She started to say something. Odile knew already sugar. Ilse had told her while Sable was at the office. Sable turned to Ilse. Ilse had opened Rocco's safe last night, she explained. After the state woman had left, she had sat in that little office with the space heater, and she had opened the safe she had been avoiding since he had died 2 years ago. And she had found a letter. It had been in an envelope marked in his handwriting, Odile's business, not to be opened during his lifetime. She had obeyed him for 2 years. She had stopped obeying him last night. Sable sat down. Ilse reached into her coat pocket. She took out a single folded sheet of paper. It had been folded in thirds and pressed flat for a long time. She set it on the table between them. This was a copy, she told her. The original was at the attorney's, in case any of this ever needed to be a document. Sable opened the paper. The paper was in a man's handwriting, slanted, careful, in blue fountain pen ink that had gone a little brown with age. It said to my wife Ilse, "If you find this after I am gone. In April of 1970, I bought 4 acres from Samuel Tobias Whitfield at less than market. He was dying. His wife was dying. He needed the money faster than the land was worth. I told him I would pay him fair. I did not pay him fair. I paid him what he asked, and no more. I did this because I was 34 years old, and I thought money was the same thing as smart. I was wrong." There is a photograph in my sock drawer of a girl who worked here in 1968. She was Samuel Whitfield's daughter. Her name was Odile. I never told her what I did to her father. If she ever comes back to this place, Ilse do what I did not have the character to do. Make it right. The paper was signed, Rocco Marchetti, dated August 12, 2004. Sable read it once. Then she read it again. Then she looked up at Odile. Odile's eyes were shining. They were not spilling. Odile did not spill in front of the state, did not spill in front of Elise, did not spill in front of a granddaughter who had just spent 5 weeks holding a door in the plane of its own frame. "Sugar," she murmured. Sable met her eyes. Daddy had chosen to sell, Odile said. He had not been tricked. He had been cornered. There was a difference, and she did not want Sable to spend 1 hour of her young life hating a dead man who had bought a strip of land under bad conditions from another dead man who had been too proud to say the word please. Sable started to speak. "Grandma," Odile knew already. Sable let her thought finish anyway. Ilse was going to try to make it right anyway. She was going to try to knock the sale price down. She was going to try to hand Odile the west half acre for less than it was worth. And she was going to feel very good about doing it. And Odile was going to say no. She was going to say no because she had been paying that debt with her silence since she was 12. She was going to say yes only to a fair price. Because taking less than fair was what Ilse's husband had done to her father. And she was not going to close that circle by taking less than fair from her. Odile looked at Sable a long time. Softly, she agreed. That was exactly right. Ilse hated both of them a little bit right now, she admitted. But they were correct. Fair price it was. Ilse then said something in Italian under her breath that Sable did not understand, but that sounded somehow like a woman thanking a saint she had been avoiding. Delphine came back on Monday at 2. She wore a different coat. Same brand. Warmer color. She had not, it appeared, gone home to Alabama. She had stayed at a hotel in the county seat. Sable did not want to know which one. Delphine came alone this time. She did not bring a lawyer. She did not bring a folder. She brought a small alligator handbag and a face that had rehearsed the wrong lines. Sable met her on the porch. Sable did not invite her in. 30 minutes, Sable told her. Sable, sweetheart, Delphine began. 29, now Sable said. Delphine breathed out. Fine, fine, fine. She had a copy of Sable's grandmother's rental income statement from Alabama. A cottage in Prattville. Sable's grandfather had bought it in 1979. It had been rented to a series of tenants since 1998. The income had been deposited into an interest-bearing account at First Coastal Bank of Mobile. As of last month, that account had contained $148,000 and change. Odile had never touched it. Sable knew. Delphine's mouth opened. Sable had known since she was 16, she told her. Grandma had shown her the passbook. She had told her the money was hers when she died. She had said if Sable ever needed it before, then she only had to ask. She had said she had never touched it because she had wanted Sable to have a cushion that she could not spend during a bad year of her own life. Delphine's mouth closed. Slower she pressed on. Sable, she was not going to lie to her. She had been named a beneficiary on a trust attached to that cottage. It was an old instrument. From '99. Sable's grandfather had set it up thinking he would live longer than he did. The trust language was old. It had a clause that activated only under a certain condition. She had consulted with 2 attorneys about that clause. 3, Sable corrected. Delphine paused. The third one, Sable told her, was a woman in Birmingham who specialized in elder law. She had written a widely cited paper on coercive guardianship petitions. She had told Delphine that what she wanted to hear was legally aggressive and morally indefensible. Sable knew because she was also the woman Sable had called at 8 o'clock that morning. She had remembered Delphine. She had remembered the questions she had asked her 3 weeks ago. She had been very sorry. She had not been surprised. Delphine stared at her daughter. The wind moved a small strand of expensive whiskey-colored hair across her forehead. Very quietly, she breathed out her daughter's name. Sable said, "Mama." The word did not come out cruel. It came out flat. It came out the way you would say a word you had been saving in your mouth for 17 years and had not decided until that moment whether you would speak it or spit it. She had not come back for Grandma, Sable continued. She had come back for a cottage in Prattville, a bank account in Mobile, and a clause in a document that would have activated if Grandma had let herself be put in a home. She had called APS because if the state had placed her in institutional care, the clause activated and she had a claim. She had not thought Sable would understand the clause, because she had not known Sable read faster than she signed. She had not known because she had not been in a room with her since Sable was 4. Delphine looked at the porch boards. "Sable," she pleaded. "Please." Sable was not going to hate her, she told her. She was not going to build a fence around her life and put her name on it. She was not going to spend one afternoon a year missing a mother she had not had. She was going to keep taking care of Grandma. She was going to keep sewing pants for the diner. She was going to keep this door in the plane of its own frame. And Delphine was going to get in her rental car, and she was going to drive back to whatever hotel she had slept in last night, and she was going to fly home to Alabama, and she was going to tell her third attorney that she had been unable to obtain guardianship of an elderly woman because the elderly woman had a granddaughter with a folder. Delphine started to cry. Sable did not know if the tears were real. Sable did not need to know. Quietly, she added one last thing. "This door had cost her $6, Mama. Delphine didn't have a key." Delphine turned. She walked down the porch step. She walked across the gravel to the silver rental SUV. She did not look back. She got in. She drove away. Sable stayed on the porch until the sound of the tires faded on the highway. Then she went inside. Odile was in the vinyl chair. Odile had heard every word. Odile did not say anything for a long moment. Then she reached out her good hand, and Sable came and knelt beside her, and Odile put her hand on the crown of Sable's head, the way she had put her hand on Sable's head every night from the age of 4 until Sable turned 12 and decided she was too old for it, which she never actually had been, which Odile had known and had waited. Softly Odile set her name into the top of her hair, Sable Louise Whitfield. That had been her grandfather's absolute child again. Sable into Odile's knee murmured that she kept hearing that. She'd keep hearing it. Ilsa came over that Saturday. She came over with a bottle of good wine that had been in her cellar since Rocco was alive, and a plate of biscotti she had made that morning, and a manila envelope with a proposed sale agreement inside. She sat down at the folding table. She poured 3 small glasses of wine, even for Odile, who did not drink, but who accepted the glass because Ilsa had poured it. Sable took her own glass and held it. She did not know how she felt about wine. She did not have to know yet. 24,000 for the half acre, Ilse announced. That was the appraisal Sable acknowledged. That was the appraisal Ilse confirmed. Sable did not get a discount for being wronged 55 years ago by a man. Ilse had married 14 years after the fact. That was Sable's rule, which was also hers now. Sable proposed $180 a month. 15 years. 2 months down. $1,200 down. Yes. Odile asked about interest. 2.5%, which was what a conservative savings account would pay Ilse if she put the 24 in the bank instead. She was not making profit off them. She was not losing money on them. That was the definition of fair, which was a word Sable's granddaughter used like a hammer. She had learned it from her grandfather, Odile murmured. And from her, Ilse added. Odile did not disagree. There was one condition, Ilse continued. Sable looked up. The tin box came with the land, the photograph, the letter Rocco had left her, all of it, because those papers belonged here now, not in her kitchen, here, under the roof of the cabin where the woman in the photograph had become a woman. Odile put her glass down. "Ilsa Marchetti," she said quietly. Ilsa held up a hand. Odile should not thank her. She was not going to thank her. Odile murmured. She was going to say that Rocco had chosen better than he had deserved when he had asked her. Ilse smiled for the first time all afternoon. He had. They signed the sale agreement on Monday. Sable filed the caregiver affidavit the same afternoon. She wrote the caregiver's name at the top in her small, tight hand. Sable Louise Whitfield, age 21. Address Cabin 7, West Half Acre, Blue Lantern Road Section 12, adjacent to Highway 87. She notarized it at the same courthouse. Miss Bola stamped it and did not charge her. Marlin came out on a Sunday. He did not text ahead. He did not honk. He drove up the gravel entrance in a work van that said Hollis Millwork on the side in dark green letters, and he stopped in front of Cabin 7 and sat in the driver's seat with both hands on the wheel for a long minute before he got out. He was thinner than he had been in the driveway. He was wearing the old gray sweatshirt Sable recognized from when he had painted his own house in the summer of 2019. He carried nothing. Sable was on the porch with a bowl of butter beans in her lap. She was shelling them. "Uncle Marlin." "Sable, sit down." He sat on the porch step. He did not look at her. He looked at the blue door. He looked at the brass number 7, which had been polished the week before by Warren and remounted with 2 brass screws Odile had found in the tin box. He had sold the Airbnb rental, he told her, still not looking. It had not been his to sell, Sable said quietly. It had been his mother's house. He had closed the listing. He had refunded the 2 upcoming bookings. He had closed the credit union account. He had moved the balance into a savings account in Mom's name. There was $2,600 in it. It was not enough. He knew it was not enough. It was what he had. Sable did not answer. He had sold 40% of Whitfield Millwork to Renata, he went on. Legally, on paper, through a lawyer. 2 weeks ago, she was a partner now. The Airbnb income was gone. The tax filings for the last 3 years had been amended. He was going to owe the state some money. He was going to owe the federal government more money. He was not going to lose the shop, but he was going to be smaller for a long time. She asked why he was telling her. Because Renata had told him she had called Sable the night before the auction, he said, and he wanted Sable to know that she had done the right thing, and that he had not fired her, and that she and he were actually all right, which was more than he deserved. Yes, Mom was inside. She was. Was he allowed to speak with her? Sable told him that was not her question to answer. She got up. She took the bowl of butter beans inside. She set the bowl on the folding table. She told her grandmother he was on the porch. Odile had heard. She got to say whether he came in. Sable added she was aware sugar. Sable stepped back out onto the porch. She told him he might knock. Marlin knocked. "Come in," Odile called. He came in. He did not look at anything but her. Odile was in the vinyl chair. Her sling had been retired the week before. Her right arm sat carefully on the arm of the chair. Her left hand rested on the sewing machine. The tremor was there. It was always there. She had stopped hiding it. Marlin stopped 3 feet from the chair. He did not sit down. "Mama," he breathed. Marlin Grady Whitfield. He knew. He did not know, Odile told him, which was why he was still going to hear it. "Sit down." He sat down on the folding chair. She looked at him for a long time, then she began. She had raised him in a house she had paid for with tips and hemmed pants. His father had worked the road crew. He had given her every dollar. She had given him every dollar. When Marlin had started that shop in '98, she had written him $18,000 out of her grief fund. She had called it a grief fund because his father had just died, and she had not known what else to call the money she had saved by not being able to spend it during his last year. Marlin had known what it was called. He had cashed the check anyway, which had been his right, which had been her gift, which she did not regret, not $1. Marlin's mouth moved. He did not speak. But when his father had been alive, Odile continued, he had told her he did not want the check written yet. He had said, "Wait a season, Odile." He had said, "If he asks a second time, then." He had never asked a second time. He had asked her at the funeral, in the fellowship hall, in front of the ham. Did he remember? He remembered. Good. He apologized then. "Mama." She let the apology sit between them a moment before she answered. She heard him. He apologized again for not opening the door on Thursday. She let her fingers tap once slowly on the arm of the vinyl chair. She had heard that too. He apologized for saying the phrase "mother problem" in a kitchen where his wife could hear him. She had not known he had said that she told him. She looked at Sable. Sable did not look away. Now Odile murmured she knew. "Mama." She lifted her good hand. She did not raise it high. She lifted it just enough to stop him. He was going to fix the ceiling, she said. There was a section over the corner post that Warren could not reach because his shoulder was not what it had once been. There was a strip of hurricane clip that Jen from Ridgeway had put on, and it was not right, and she knew it was not right, but Odile had not had the heart to tell her because she had been doing her a kindness. Marlin was going to fix the strip. He was going to bring the drill from his shop. He was going to bring his own coffee. He was going to arrive at 7 in the morning on Saturday. He was going to work under the direction of his niece. Because this cabin was her cabin, not Odile's, not his, hers. And if he argued with her about a fastener, he would lose. Because she was his father's absolute child. Did he understand? He understood. Also, Odile added he would begin paying her $200 a month for as long as they both lived, not to repay the $18,000. That had been a gift. That would remain a gift. The $200 was rent. On the room he had promised her over his garage that had been on Airbnb since March. That was his room. That was his money. $200 a month. Every month. Beginning December 1st. Yes, ma'am. Now come here, she told him. Let his mother look at him. He came. He knelt beside the chair. Odile put her good hand on the side of his face. She looked at him a long, long time. "Baby," she whispered. He closed his eyes. He was going to be all right. He was not going to be all right this year. He was going to be all right by the year after. Did he hear her? He nodded against her hand. There were butter beans in the bowl, she added, to take some home to his wife. Saturday came in cold. Marlin arrived at 6:52. He had brought his own coffee. He had brought a second one for Sable. He did not bring one for himself. He gave both away. Sable put him up on the platform under the corner post. She handed him a driver bit and a box of screws. Interior grade, she told him. Not exterior. The exterior grade went there. She pointed. He looked at the screw. He looked at the pile. He picked the right one on the third try. She did not correct the first two. Sable, he said halfway through the morning. She waited. Thank you for not correcting the first two, he told her. She reminded him he had corrected himself. He knew. They worked all morning. At lunch, Ilse brought sandwiches and a thermos of coffee that was this time real. Warren stopped by with a bag of apples. Maya sent Jen with a fresh bundle of hurricane clips because Odil's assessment had been correct. Without embarrassment, Jen admitted she had done that one bad. Sable told her she had done most of them right. Only most was not enough on one, a roof, Jen answered, and Sable thought her grandfather could not have said it better. Which was, Sable thought exactly why Jen had said it out loud in front of Odile. At 2 o'clock, Marlin stepped down off the platform and said it was finished. Sable climbed up. She checked every screw, every clip, every seam. She stepped down. It was finished, she agreed. Marlin nodded. He gathered his tools into the shop's canvas bag. He walked to the blue door. He stopped at the threshold. He turned back. Sable, he asked. Was there room for him? She looked at him a moment. Then evenly she told him. There was room for an uncle. There was not room for entitlement. There was room for a Saturday morning. There was not room for a mother problem. There was room for $200 a month. There was not room for what he owed her that money would not cover. That part he would work off in Saturdays. Did he understand? He understood. Then yes. He nodded once. He put on his hat. He walked out. The wind at the blue door lifted a corner of Odile's good coat where it hung on the peg beside the sewing machine. Well, Odile murmured. Well, Sable, echoed back. The December 14th neurology appointment happened at 10 a.m. at a small teaching clinic 3 counties over. Sable drove Odile. Odile wore her good coat and the earrings Sable had worn to the courthouse. The neurologist was a woman about Ms. Brennan's age. She was kind. She said the words early stage and slow progression and manageable. She asked about tremor triggers. She asked about sleep. She asked about mood. She asked about caregiver support. Sable filled out the form. Under caregiver, she wrote her own name. Under contact list, she wrote in this order, Ilse Marchetti, Warren Pike, Maya Santos, Marlin Whitfield, Renata Whitfield. She did not write Delphine. Odile saw the list. Odile said nothing. The neurologist ordered a new prescription. She recommended a physical therapy referral. She said she wanted to see Odile again in April. They stopped for pancakes on the way home. Odile ate every bite. Odile complained about the coffee. Odile asked the waitress her name, and the waitress told her It was Lorelei. Lorelei, honey. Odile told her this was the best plate of pancakes she had had in 6 weeks. Lorelei, embarrassed, admitted they were frozen. Then Odile murmured Lorelei had thawed them beautifully. Sable laughed into her napkin. Sable Odile murmured across the booth, "Ma'am." They were going to be all right. "Yes, ma'am. Not this year. Next year." Sable knew. They painted the cabin in the last warm week of April. Warm cream on the walls. Deep blue for the door. Odile picked the colors. Ilse did one whole wall from a folding chair with an umbrella clipped to the arm. Warren painted the porch rail and declared the uneven section historic. Maya came with a paint sprayer and swore at it for 20 minutes and then used a brush like everyone else. Marlin came after work on Friday and finished the trim without being asked. Renata came Saturday morning. She stayed on the porch. She had brought her grandmother a plant she told Sable. Sable looked at the plant. It was a small ceramic pot with a start of Christmas cactus in it. Odile had had a Christmas cactus in the cottage. It had died in the storage unit. "Come in," Sable told her. Renata came in. She sat in the folding chair. She did not sit near Odile at first. Odile watched her. "Renata," she said finally. "Mama, come here." Renata came. Odile took the plant. Odile set it on the sewing machine. She had made a phone call from a gas station, Odile said. "Yes, ma'am. She should have made it a year earlier." "Yes, ma'am." Odile was not going to forgive her today. Renata had not come to be forgiven today. Then Odile murmured she should sit down and drink the coffee Ilse had made. It was drinkable this time. Renata sat. Renata drank. The brass number 7 had come off the blue door during the sanding. Marlin had taken it home. He had drilled out the old broken screw at the shop. He had polished the brass with a rag and a small tin of paste his father had left him. He had rethreaded the mounting holes. He brought it back on a Saturday in May. He handed it to Sable. She should put it on, he told her. She should put it on with him. Sable answered. She held the number in place. Marlin drove one screw. Sable drove the other. The 7 sat level for the first time in years. Sable stepped back. Odile came out onto the porch. She had been inside. She had heard the drill. She had waited to come out until the sound stopped because she had wanted the 7 to be up before she saw it. She stood on the porch. She looked at the number. She looked at the blue door. She looked at Sable. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the photocopy of the black and white photograph. 2 girls in white kerchiefs, a broom, a tin bucket, the blue door, the crooked 7. Sable Odile said she would like her to hang this photograph on the wall inside, to the left of the new window, so the afternoon light fell on it every day at 3 o'clock, which was the hour she had used to finish cleaning cabin 7 in 1968, and which was the hour a certain young man on the road crew had used to walk past this door with his lunch pail on his way back from lunch, and which was the hour he had first looked at her on his way past, which was the hour Sable that everything that had been true about their family since had begun. Sable took the paper from her grandmother's hand. "Yes, ma'am." She went inside. She found a small brass frame Ilsa had given her in the tin box. She slid the photocopy into the frame. She hung it on the wall to the left of the new window. Then she came back out onto the porch. Odile was standing with one hand on the porch rail Warren had rebuilt. The afternoon light was coming down slantwise across the highway. It caught the top edge of the brass 7 and turned it for a moment into a small gold letter. It caught Odile's hair. It caught the corner of the blue door where a chip in the paint had not been touched up on purpose because Sable had said they were keeping that chip and Odile had agreed sugar. That was where the wood remembered itself. Quietly, Odile spoke her granddaughter's full name, Sable Louise, ma'am. The day she had first washed this cabin, Odile said she had been 18 years old, and she had thought her life had been thrown in here. She had thought she was going to be a girl with a broom until her mother got well, or her father got well, or a man came along and offered her a way out that did not smell like bleach, which were 3 thin hopes sugar, 3 very thin hopes. Sable did not speak. It turned out she had not been being thrown in here, Odile continued. It turned out she had been being asked to hold a chair for a girl who had not been born yet. Sable's eyes filled. She did not blink. And it turned out that girl had grown up, Odile said, and she had bought this cabin for $6 because a woman had told her there was no room. And she had said, "Grandma, there was going to be room." And there had been. Sable took her grandmother's hand. Odile's hand trembled. Sable's hand was steady. "There was room here for them," Odile murmured. "There was. And there was no room left." Odile finished for anyone who thought they had started nowhere. The wind moved across the half-acre. The Christmas cactus on the sewing machine had already started to put out a small green shoot. Warren's book box at the gravel entrance held 2 mysteries, a cookbook, 1 romance, and a folded $5 bill from a stranger who had left it under a paperback about horses. Ilsa's lights were on in the boarded office. Maya's truck was parked crooked beside the porch because Maya could not park a truck straight to save her life. Marlon's van was gone. Renata's plant was blooming. Cabin 7 stood on 4 concrete piers on the west half-acre of Section 12, on land that had belonged to a dying man in 1970 in front of a blue door where an 18-year-old girl had once handed a peach wrapped in a handkerchief back to a 23-year-old road crew foreman with better handwriting than the men he worked with on a hinge that had been rehung by hand by a girl who had refunded a spring semester deposit to buy a doorway. Sable stood beside her grandmother. The afternoon light moved. The brass 7 caught the gold. The blue door stayed in the plane of its own frame. And the 2 women on the porch, 176, 121. One both Whitfield. Both of them, their grandfather's absolute children, did not move for a long time. They did not need to. They were already home.